Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to World at War Comics. I have the veteran, Mr. Joe Harris, comic book writer, screenwriter, and here to talk about some really exciting news for a very popular title that you might not have seen in the last few years that is coming back. But before we jump into that, Joe, thank you for joining me. How is your week going? How are things going for you right now?
Thank you for having me. It's been pretty hectic getting back into the swing of things post San Diego,
Yeah.
kind of. Yeah, but I'm almost up to speed where I should be. It's Wednesday, so we're on the downward slope.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I'd love to kind of go way back if that's okay, Joe. I'd love to ask this question of writers and creators like yourself. Where did that passion for storytelling start in your life? And was there one person that you could point to that really kind of directed you in that, whether it's a family member or maybe a teacher or something like that?
Uh, it's funny. I wanted to do the things I'm doing and have done forever. So it's like I don't remember a time not pursuing that. It's funny. I'll give you two people that are more instrumental to my career and my success than anybody else. One is Adam Polina, who's a childhood friend, former X-Force artist, generally brilliant, beautiful guy. He's one of them, and our mutual friend, this guy named Gil, who introduced us when we were kids. He was my friend that took me to all the comic book back issue sales and made something really geeky like comics seem like something cool worth cutting school for.
Love it. I love it. Definitely can relate to that. Hopping the fence, grabbing a bike, and heading over to the comic shop during class.
Yeah,
Got
even
me in
I had a
trouble.
car in my senior year, so it was like goodbye. Like I'm
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, especially when you get to high school, right? And I don't know about your school, but we had open lunches, so you could actually leave and go to a
Yeah,
fast
yeah,
food place
yeah.
and come. A
That
lot
meant
of times,
open. That meant open slots any time of the day. Yeah.
exactly.
What a great idea. Let students with cars just take
Yeah.
off.
I want to say that's where summer school was invented, right? When they opened up lunches, right? Because we all had to go back and retake a class or two because of that. But
Oh, yeah. Sometimes, yeah, that did happen.
sometimes. Yeah. Well, us talk about your first entrance into comics from a professional level. Do you remember what that was and what that feeling was like when you finally made it and you were given a title?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty young at the time, but at the time I had been trying to break into comics for a couple of years. Since I was still in school, I was kind of kicking around the old Valiant and Acclaim offices here in New York City. Uh, where else? Broadway comics. Like I had so much, like I was trying to get things going, and I was only like 22, 23 years old. And I finally ended up getting a break at Marvel back in like 19 geez, like 1998 because my student film I went to film school here in New York City, and my student film, I had a screening of it in town, and Adam, my friend Adam Polina, he brought a bunch of Marvel editors down to see it, and we just started talking afterwards. And I wouldn't say that it wasn't my ambition to write comics, but it was a very serendipitous situation. I was not expecting it, and it led to me writing a variety of X titles, fill-ins back then, like an X-Force issue here, X Factor there, a few miniseries, X-Men miniseries, until finally I wrote a couple of monthly titles for them: Slingers, the old Spider-Man spinoff, and Bishop, the Last X-Man.
That one I'm very familiar with, Bishop for sure. Yeah, that's awesome, man. Now, growing up, when you were ditching school to go to the comic shop, what were the titles that you were picking up that really got you excited and hooked on comics? And later, when you finally did break through on Marvel, were you able to touch some of those characters that you were reading as a fan? And what did
Well,
that
the
feel like?
X-Men, yeah, the X-Men certainly, because I grew up much like everyone in our generation did, just absorbing Chris Claremont's X-Men
Yeah,
run through all the different artists that he worked with, all the wonderful people we all can name, right? But so that was a big one for me when I was a kid, looking forward to that every week. We still hadn't gotten to image breaking kind of things apart a little bit, so you still had all the best talent at Marvel. And it was pretty glorious buying Todd's Spider-Man during the, that period. And Mike Barron and Steve Rue's Nexus was a big one that I loved as a kid. These are all titles that really informed my want to tell science fiction and supernatural thrillers. These are the formative things.
Yeah, yeah. It seems like you really kind of focus in that area as a writer. Would you consider those your two favorite genres to focus on, sci-fi and horror?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, for
And I
sure.
like,
Yeah.
and I like mixing things with horror, like rock and roll horror,
Yeah.
or something supernatural like the X-Files, or it's a very elastic genre, as is
Yeah.
science fiction. I tend to call it all speculative fiction because I think it's very encompassing.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Absolutely. Well, then you jumped in and created, I don't know how many, three, four, five different titles as an independent too with Oni Press, if I'm not mistaken,
Mhm.
too, right? And that was even
Yeah.
before the Great Pacific, which we're going to talk about. I think you had a few titles before that, right?
Yeah, I did. I wrote a few books for Oni Press, Ghost Project with
Ghost
Steve
Project. Yeah.
Ralston, which I remain very proud of and fond of.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we're going to have some reprint news on that soon. Spontaneous, which was about the search for the truth behind spontaneous human combustion. With Brett Weldelay, I did, and then I did with Adam Polina, Wars in Toyland, a graphic novel.
Yeah. Wars Toyland was great, man. Well, then we jump right into Great Pacific, and man, I felt like it was one of those titles. I remember it coming out and picking it up, and certainly wasn't what we expected. When you saw that first cover, and I'm trying to remember the
Mhm.
first cover, but anyways, completely blew me away. If you could give us kind of your elevator pitch of what the Great Pacific is. We were talking a little bit before, and like I said, I made a
Right,
dumb joke about what it was kind of based off of. But if you could give us that elevator pitch, because it is as relevant today as it was in 2012,
right,
and I'm
right.
hoping we could talk a little bit about that as well.
Well, the impetus for the series was the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is not, in fact, a contiguous continent of plastic and trash, but that's sort of how we sort of hyper realized it in our book. And what it's really about is it follows Great Pacific, the title follows a young oil heir who decides he wants to disrupt the system in a very severe way, and he ends up faking his own death, embezzling a lot of money from the company his family took generations to build, and resurfaces out on the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, where he plants a flag and declares it his own sovereign country.
And then
So,
all hell breaks loose over 18 issues, which
yeah,
is
because
pretty awesome.
it's right. Suddenly, something nobody cared enough to clean up is the want to any number of people who
Yeah.
don't want our protagonist Chaz there, and
Yeah.
want what treasure lays in the mess.
I want to say it's ridiculous, but I feel like if it was able to do it today, it would be the same situation if someone planted a flag. Everyone would then focus on it, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. There's a political cartoonist, Matt Boards, did a really good cartoon when Great Pacific #1 came out, sort of skewering the fact that people talk about things like this a lot, but there needs to be a large scale response to it that just isn't
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah, yeah. It always seems like I'll see videos and I follow stuff on Instagram and there's a lot of amazing technology for cleaning up stuff like that, but I just never see it go
Well,
to
you're
like that
talking
next
about a
level.
field of trash that's
Yeah,
just below the surface that is more than twice the size of Texas.
crazy.
And that's not all of the plastic pollution that's in the water. Obviously, we find plastic in the Arctic ice. We
Yeah.
find plastic in newborn babies, microplastics. And I just glanced past an article recently that said microplastics have been found inside the male penis.
Great. That's
Yeah, I
awesome.
don't know how they got there, but that's you know, it's everywhere.
Chris, it's everywhere, man. It's everywhere. Which is really, really sad, but that's the situation that we're in. So when you came up with the Great Pacific, can you kind of talk about, and I guess we're kind of talking about it now, but talk about what were the motivating factors and what were the ideas around Chaz and everything that you did around that character and that patch of land that he made a sovereign nation in?
Well, I both wanted to bring attention to this very real problem, but I wanted to do it in a sort of like an off-glancing, like an oblique way, where we didn't have the most altruistic hero looking to clean it all up. It wasn't going to be like Captain Planet,
Yeah.
that wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to tell the story of this young industrialist who sometimes thinks rightly or wrongly, in some cases he's not correct, that it takes ambitious, resourced people who aren't afraid to push forward, and that's how society makes its biggest advances. And I thought about people like Andrew Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, like the industrialists that built America, essentially. And there's a lot of flaws with these people and a lot of success that earned them their great man status.
Mhm.
And our character Chaz really fancies himself one of these people. And again, not always with the right. He means well. He has a heart of gold, but he also is in it for himself to some degree. And I think we see that playing out as people like Elon Musk takes on a more public role, and I think Great Pacific is in some ways prescient.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it went on for 18 issues, and came to an end. I guess that would have been in 2014, 2015,
Something like that. Yeah,
something
right
like
in there
that. Yeah,
somewhere.
yeah. So has there been a thought to go back and add anything
Well,
or
here's the thing. We're doing this Zoop campaign to collect it. We're calling it the completely trashed edition.
yeah, I love that.
And one of the stretch goals involved is going to be, if we hit it, Martin and I are going to do new content for the book.
Nice.
So it'll include, maybe we'll do it like either 8 or 12 pages, depending on what gets unlocked. But we have a really good short story that I'm excited to tell.
That is so cool. That's very exciting because if you go to the site now, it doesn't really give a lot of information. So I'm going to share my screen real quick, Joe, if it's okay with you.
Yeah, yeah,
I just want to share with everybody. Here's kind of what it looks like. Now I've already signed up, but right here will be an empty box. This is where you put in your email address, and there you'll be notified as soon as this goes live. So everyone, I'll make sure that the link is below, Joe. That way, it make it really simple for everybody to go
yeah,
there,
sure.
sign up, and then you'll get that link. And then once it goes live, right, then we'll be able to see all these different rewards that will be unlocked as you hit certain goals. And man, that is so exciting to see that there could be in additional 8 to 10 pages added to this amazing story of Chaz and everything that's going on, by unlocking some of those goals. So I think a lot of fans that read this title, 12 years ago, we'll be really excited to see some new storylines added to it. But yeah, I encourage everyone to get over there and check out the completely trashed edition, which I think is hilarious and I love it. That's awesome, man. So what does it feel like, Joe? I mean, you've worked for DC, you've worked for Dynamite, IDW, you work for Marvel. Like you've accomplished a lot, and then you have these amazing titles that are creator owned, and you've worked with some amazing artists like a
Sure.
Martine to produce them. When you look at your career, are there gaps in your career where you're like, this is the one thing that I haven't accomplished yet that I would still like to, or have you pretty much did everything that you set out to do within the comic industry?
Well, I mean, I'm looking to do whatever I'm passionate about next. I always have new things in the pipeline. I've got 3 or 4 new creator-owned books that are working their way toward announcement and release now.
Nice.
And so for me, it's not a matter of like, I'm not, I don't, I'm not a titan of the industry. So
Yeah.
it's not like I feel, well, I had my storied run on these characters, and I, I've been fortunate enough to build relationships and to have a body of work that does span these different, I guess, eras and companies. But I'm always most excited. and always the most concerned with what am I doing next, and is this the right one to do, and will I really want to do it? So hopefully it's the right thing I should be doing because it's what I really want to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're such, I don't know how
Now
to say
there are
this,
still
but
there are like unrequited things, like
yeah,
I'd love to write Star Wars in some capacity, like but
that'd be
then
cool.
yeah, but like um I don't have the same itch maybe I did when I was a 20 something trying to work at comics at all costs.
Yeah, maybe as you get a little bit more mature, those stories that you have inside are probably a little bit
Mm.
more important to tell as opposed to going to someone else's IP and trying to create a story within that. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It's not necessarily my ambition. Am
Yeah,
I open to working more for these companies? Sure, if they want
yeah,
me, I'm willing to do it, sure. But that's not what I spend my nights stressing over and my days blissfully working on.
yeah,
So,
yeah. That's incredible. I feel like right now we're again, independent comics has been something that's been around for as longer than I've been alive, right? And then you have Image Comics come in the 90s and really open the door for other people and made it more mainstream. I mean, there were still great indies before that, but I feel like Image kind of opened the door to a lot of other people to come in and
mhm.
really take a
That's a
chance on
big
their own
tent.
created work. Yeah, big tent, right? And now you look at Zoop, you look at other crowdfunding, there's hundreds and hundreds of people telling their own stories. I feel like it's the golden age of independence right now. And I personally love it because some of these stories just don't make sense in a Batman comic book or a Spider-Man comic book.
Yeah.
But I still love the stories that are being told in independence. And now you're starting to see some amazing talent from Marvel and DC creating their own publishing
You
brands.
are,
And
yeah. Isn't that
yeah, it's
cool?
incredible. I love it. I think it's so cool. And they're still staying connected to some of those titles that they've worked on. Like Scott Snyder has done a lot of incredible independence, but he's still coming
Right,
back and doing the
right,
absolute and
right,
the
right.
all in stuff. I love it. And I think it's just such an amazing time from a storytelling standpoint to be a comic book fan. Do you feel like within the industry the same way? Like this is really an awesome time to tell your own stories? Or do you think
I
it's a little
think,
bit harder because so many people are involved in it?
well, yes, but I don't see that as a detriment.
Yeah.
It is what it is. There's no shortage of talent and there's no shortage of really great work, the majority of which probably gets missed just by virtue of people only have so much bandwidth and so many dollars to pick up their pull sheet, their pull list every week. So it's both daunting but inspiring because there really is no shortage of great stuff out there. We all know it. It's hard. It's impossible to keep up with it almost. It's just a glut. But that's a good thing. It's good for you.
Yeah, yeah. As a comic book fan, it's amazing for me, and a lot of times I'm just so happily surprised when I do pick up something on a Wednesday that makes it to. I have a pretty small comic book store, and they have a pretty good size independent section. But again, most of it is still the Marvel DC. But when I
Right,
find that independent where you just like crack it open, you're like, wow, this is amazing. I was so
right.
glad that my comic shop had this. To your point, there's just so much out there that you're gonna miss a lot. And so that's why I love having these kind of conversations with creators because
Sure,
sometimes you're
sure.
exposed to stuff that you might not have been exposed to just because there
Yeah,
is so
well,
much.
even, before Image, there were indie sci-fi and superhero titles that worked their way onto my pull list.
Yeah.
There was a book called Faust by David Quinn and Tim Vigil, which was a really fairly X-rated
Yeah.
comic from the 80s, but it was intense spatter horror. And I was underage, but they would still sell it to me at the comic shop. So those are good memories. Or
Yeah.
picking up an issue of Cerberus,
Yeah.
or of course I mentioned Nexus earlier because I
Yeah.
used to like quite a number of those old first comics
Oh
titles.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. I got quite a bit of those titles. Nexus for sure. Such an amazing run. But yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
Cherry. There's like a whole group of guys up in like San Francisco that were putting out some pretty adult oriented stuff that we would always try to sneak in.
There was a series I really liked. It was the first thing I think Bart Sears ever did that was close to mainstream, called Hero Alliance.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
David
yeah.
Campitti wrote it, who now reps a large number of artists in this industry. And it was a really good mature superhero story with some tragedy that go. It was
Yeah.
just something. It's like, whoa, what's this? It really did
Yeah.
pop when we were kids.
Kind of before its time too, right? Because later on we get Watchmen that kind of has a more of a, I don't know, relatable, because some of the things they were doing in that movie was terrible, but it's more relatable, right? There's flaws
Yeah, yeah,
actually
yeah.
in
Treating them as
people.
characters in a serious, dramatic situation, and
Exactly.
mhm.
Yeah, yeah, and that's awesome, man. So, do we have a date yet of when the Great Pacific will launch on Zoop, or that hasn't been announced when it goes live yet?
No, it hasn't been announced
Okay.
yet, but it won't be long.
Yeah, it won't be too long. Yeah, it should be pretty soon. So I would certainly encourage everybody to go in there, throw in your email. You'll get a nice email from Jordan and the entire team over at Zoop, and they'll let you know, hey, get over here, we're ready to go. And man, I'm really pulling for it. This is awesome to have it all in a. So I assume there'll be a lot of different like paperback, hardback. There'll be like different options.
Sure, sure. There'll be, an option, obviously for signatures, and there'll be an option if people want Martine to do like a little remark in there. Um, we're also going to have some giveaways, and like I said, the new material is the ultimate unlock we're trying to get to.
That'd be so cool, man. I think that would be very exciting for everybody, especially with Martine coming back to even draw that. I think that would be exciting. He's such a like a
Yep.
superstar now, man. He's such a superstar. The guy's been,
My boy.
yeah, yeah. So you worked on a couple different projects with him. So Great Pacific wasn't the first project you worked with Martine, if I'm not
No, it was
mistaken,
the
correct?
first. It was the
But there was
first.
another one after that, though,
We
right?
did a series after that called Snowfall that ran for eight or
Snowfall,
nine
yeah.
issues.
That's right, yeah. That's awesome, man. So I don't know if you could say this, and if you can't, no problem, I get it. But you talked about new titles and new stories that you're working on right now that will be released later on. So we'll all find out what you're working on soon enough. But will Martine be part of any of those projects or other artists that you've worked with
Not
before?
the ones I'm referring to now, but we
Gotcha.
always
Okay.
talk about working together again. So,
Yeah.
I don't know how I could pry him off of Ice Cream Man though, because
Yeah. Yeah.
why aren't they nominating this book for an Eisner already?
They should have won several. It's so amazing. I mean, I grew up, watching a lot of that kind of sci-fi Twilight Zone. And I
Mhm.
remember, as a little kid watching the black and white with my parents, there was one where it shows a guy and he's like driving through the mountains and he stops
Mhm.
at a little coffee shop and has a cup of coffee. And then he leaves and he drives and he just keeps ending back up to that coffee shop, and he's like stuck in this trap, and that's just the whole episode, right? But for whatever reason it just freaked me out, like you would get lost in this mountain and never be able to leave. When I read Ice
Right.
Cream Man, some of these stories impact you, like the one that they just had with the family in the car crash, and then kind of going through, I don't know if you keep up with each issue,
I
but
haven't seen this,
oh,
no.
it's a two-part issue, and
Uh-huh.
it's a something that happens in like 10 seconds, and it's a terrible accident of a couple and their two kids, but it goes through everything that's going in their mind as they're going through the accident. And so it's like
Wow.
all in slow motion, and you're seeing like the fear, and I should have done this, and it's just so impactful. I don't know how they come up with these storylines,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
they're absolutely amazing. Yeah, Maxwell is. I've had him on the podcast, and there's a couple people like Patrick Horvath. I don't know if you've seen his latest title. Um, what's it called? It's about the serial killer that's a bear. Anyways, it's so
No,
incredible.
I haven't seen it.
Oh
But that's not
yes. Oh, you got to
that
check it
got the
out.
reaction out of me. I think it probably got out of him. So
It's so good. It's so good. And when you read it, you're like, I'm really worried about the creator. Like, I'd like to meet this guy and make sure he's okay, because this is crazy. And sometimes you think about that same thing with Maxwell. But
right.
anyways, there's so many good independents out right now, Joe. And obviously you're a big part of that whole world. And I'm so happy that you're still got a lot of stories to tell, and that we'd be looking forward to some more Joe Harris here very soon with some new titles. I think that's very exciting.
Yes, sir. Me too.
Yeah. Anything else, Joe, that we should touch on the Great Pacific that maybe we haven't yet?
I, nothing comes to mind. I think we hit upon everything.
Yeah, yeah. Zoop has been pretty awesome. I've had the pleasure of being able to meet a lot of creators that are working with Zoop, and for
Yeah.
someone like yourself that has the portfolio that you have, the last thing you have time for is fulfilling, 500 issues of this title that you have to personally package and mail out.
It's a
So
great it's a great concept. I mean, yes, fulfillment is something very daunting.
yeah,
It is.
yeah.
So I think these guys, they've got their shit together and they're fulfilling a need.
Yeah, yeah, very much so, very much so. So I'm super excited for you, Joe, you and Martine. I'm so glad that this title is back, all in an amazing collected edition. We'll make sure we put all the links below to make it super easy for everybody to find. And then if it's okay with you, I'll put down your Instagram and some of your other socials
Yeah,
that people
sure.
could follow you, because certainly as you start to release some of these titles that you're working on, I think it's going to create a lot of excitement from people that are fans of your work. And I hope that I could have you back when you do make some of those announcements. I
Sure.
would love to support you and make sure that we get that word out. That would be very fun for me and hopefully beneficial to you.
Yeah, I think that would be fun for me as well.
Awesome, Joe. Well, Joe, I want to be super respectful of your time. Thank you so much. Everybody, get over to Zoop. I'll put the link below. Make sure that you sign up for the Great Pacific. This is going to be a lot of fun to get it collected. And let's get to that stretch goal so we can get this new story. I'm really excited to find out what happens next. So, Joe, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for entrusting me with your story and everything that you're working on. And I hope we could do this again, my friend.
Yep. Thanks,
Thank you,
man.
Joe. All right, have a good one.
Later,
All
dude.
right.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.